this. We are now recording, and we're now going to full size. Play from start. Okay, so my name is Morgan Chivers. I'm at the University of Texas, Arlington. And just a little bit of context on that, it's an R1 university. We've got upwards of 35,000 residential students and about 50,000 global students. And our Makerspace is on the first floor of the central library, and we see thousands of jobs. We have about 30 student employees right now, and so what this presentation is about is some of the ways that we use those student employees to both further our mission and our logistical goals, but also done that in such a way as it's student service learning. It's both within their zone of proximal development, and they have reflective exercises around that to make sure that they're aware of the type of growth and learning they're doing. So without further ado, one of the things that we have has been most critically improve the way we run on a day-to-day basis is our Octopod system. And so that's a derivative of Octoprint, which is a web-based 3D printer control system. So when we were first getting started, we were running, as many people do, a one computer to one printer type interface. And that was giving us problems both for crashing on long jobs, and also because it just dominated a lot of footprint, and there was a large budget associated with having a computer for everything. So when we were expanding from our 800 square foot space to 8,000 square feet, we realized that wasn't going to be a sustainable model, and so we were looking for more network-based solutions. There were some commercial solutions online, but they were demanding a huge price tag, and they were giving a lot more controls that we didn't really need. So we found Octoprint, which is an open source thing by Gina Hausige out of Germany, and so we've then modified that to provide access control so that learners have to swipe their ID card so we can check whether or not they are an active UTA faculty, student, or staff, and then that data gets hashed, so we don't keep track of specifically who is making those prints, but we can get that demographic data after the fact to know whether our services are being used by freshmen or primarily by master's students, or in what disciplines they're in. So that's been super useful. It also lets us do cloud-based control. So we only really have 2 command computers for all 10 of our printers, 11 of our printers. And so that lets us have a much cleaner aesthetic in the space, and still be able to have a high throughput. And so here you can see the array of Raspberry Pis mounted up on the wall, and the switch, and then all 10 of our printers. We use poly printers, which are an initiative out of Dallas Makerspace. So it's a local entrepreneurial effort, and they are easily the most reliable printers that we've had access to. You also see one of our employees picking up a thermal ticket. So Octopod also works with Fab App, which is the project we'll talk about next, to generate these automatic tickets, which saves us a heck of a lot of time and helps keep us organized. And so all of this stuff was kind of built and spearheaded by Tushar, who's one of our first student employees in the original set in October 2014. And then he moved up to be a shift lead, and then he actually changed his major from aerospace to mechanical so that he could get into additive manufacturing better, and is now in his PhD program. And so Jonathan Lee has been phenomenal in helping with these programming efforts as well. So this is an image of our former way of recording all of our data. So we were writing down manually for every ticket and every job, whether it was on the 3D printers, laser cutters, vinyl cutter, soldering irons, whatever it was, we were writing down everything about it. And so when things would get busy, this would be the first casualty. This would be the thing that would get dropped out and we wouldn't do, and then we didn't have we didn't have a good way of capturing data at the points when we were most being used. And so we knew we needed to address that. So John is now getting his master's, but at this time he was getting a bachelor's in business information systems, I believe it was. And so he proposed this system as an internship type, like a capstone class experience. And so we went down that road with him, and it has been fundamentally transformative in the way we're able to interact with the space. So we now have all of our jobs get run through FabApp, and so this is a basic interface shot. Let's see what I have next. This is probably the better one to land on while I talk about this. So all jobs get ticketed through FabApp, and that helps us track who it's associated with, again in a hashed way, so that we can get back to knowing who it is and who to give the right print back to. But it's not something where we're publishing or making available or searchable who's doing that type of work. So keeping in line with that information security systems that are key to librarianship. And then it helps interface with Octopuppet and with Juicebox, which is the system that holds down access to our more dangerous pieces of equipment, things that we want to make sure that people have the adequate training on. And so that will be, FabApp will be checking to see whether or not the person has that training. And if they do, then it enables the electricity to turn on through a power tail. And if that person does not have the adequate training, then it just will not deliver electricity. So it's kind of a nice hard stop that lets us have a little more peace of mind. And in addition to our students going around and making sure everyone's doing what they want to and what they're supposed to be doing. So that same student also was our only other person that had, I should also say before I move on, these codes are available on our GitHub page. So if you go and you search UTA FabLab through GitHub, you'll be able to find the code for Octopuppet and for FabApp. An update is coming soon to FabApp that will make it easier to modify. Right now, our first version is on there, what we're calling 0.87. And 0.9 is coming soon, which will be significantly easier to modify for your needs. And we definitely want to encourage anyone who would feel this would be useful to go out and use it. So that same student had some screen printing experience, and I had screen printing experience. And so we spent a lot of time talking about how we really wanted to have better screen printing technologies than just a simple one color on a hinge press, which is what we had been planning on doing because of the size and the expense of getting a 4-color screen printing press. So we found these plans on DIYprintingplans.com. And as you can see from on the left, it's in its fully assembled state, and on the right, it is in its partially disassembled state, so it can take up significantly less footprint, which is one of the main things that the administration was worried about investing in an expensive press and something that was going to take up a lot of space even when it wasn't being used. So this can collapse down. We didn't build the press that's available online on DIYprintingplans.com directly. We looked at it and made some changes that made it more robust. So taking out a basic Lazy Susan and putting in pillow block bearings, and then adding detente so it clicks into space a little bit better, and some spring loading so that it wants to stay up and then clicks down and helps hold itself. And then if you see, it's probably better to see on these, all of the turnbuckles, there's 3 turnbuckles and several release hold downs that make it available to get pitch and yaw and a little bit of roll control to get your screens properly aligned. And so the way we make use of this is with a vinyl cutter. And so students will cut out pieces of vinyl and then do whatever weeding. Whatever they've weeded out will then not be blocking the ink when we screen it through. And so then we can make shirts or tote bags or paper prints or whatever people feel like screen printing, as long as the detail isn't too fine, so that the adhesive can still hold on and block out the ink. And we're getting a fair amount of use on this. People are making shirts for their student clubs. We had a staff event where it was a blazing race. It's an annual event where we walk and or run for health fitness during the summer as a staff engagement thing, and we had a library team make a series of really great shirts. And so it's a great way to build identity around a space, to have a screen printing. And it was a great way for us to incorporate students' passion for building stuff, and they then got the experience of building something way more complex than they had built, and also the experience of like making a proposal, making a budget plan, writing out what they were going to need, about how long it was going to take, and going through all that type of professional practice preparation stuff. We have a series of posters, which we're still in the process of putting them up, but my former life before I came to the FabLab was as a sculpture professor and a professor in the art department, teaching 2D and 3D design. And so I had this student, Priscilla Rodriguez, and when we got the FabLab up and rolling, we were able to hire her. And so she did some stuff like taking the Octoprint logo and making a derivative of that for the Octopuppet system that we have. And then so the happy face shows up whenever we have a successful print, and the sad face shows up when we have to fail a print. And then there's a little judge's wig guy that shows up when the students are swiping their cards to give us that data point to agree to their terms of non-copyright infringement and stuff like that before they start. And then we also made this series of posters because when we moved out from an 800 square foot space where everything was right on top of each other out into an 8,000 square foot space, we had a lot of room and therefore a lot of potential for getting lost. So we made these signs that are going to be helping people find their way around. And we also took it upon ourselves to make this something that was going to help demystify the often very hyped up technologies that people are coming into access. So as we all know, like 3D printers are often marketed as being these like save all panacea type solutions. And so we just literally took them apart through like exploded diagram type things to show what they are, and then it gives us a way to talk about how they work as well. We made a series of, I think, 25 of these posters, and so the ones that we first started with, you see here on the left, it's both describing the same piece of equipment, but on the left you see the poster that we started with, and then after about a year of working on these and working through all these different posters, we came back to try and look at the set and realize that the first ones we made were way more simple. And so if you compare this one on the left to the ones we have back here once we got further into it, especially that embroidery machine, it just didn't seem like it hung cohesively together. So then we went back and made sure that we were taking things apart with the same attention to detail across the board, and really trying to highlight the parts of the equipment that make the thing work, so that they can be educational tools as well as being aesthetic and helpful to find one's way around. So we've been getting into some prosthetic designs, and I want to use this as a tale that we put iterative design into real practice. And one of the central parts of iterative design is failure, and the recognition that when you push your boundaries, it's not always going to be a successful conclusion, and that is okay. That's part of the process. So we got hooked up with this dog who was an unfortunate victim of a puppy mill. He's a very large, about 130-pound French Mastiff, and we thought that we could potentially help him by making a prosthetic. We have no experience in prostheses or any of that stuff, but we had seen a lot of 3D printed prosthetics, and so we got wrapped into this idea. And so here you see some of our early iterations. We made a mold of his remainder, and then designed around that plaster mold. to try and make a cap and a little chest harness thing. And there was a video in here that I stripped out so that it would work with this presentation format. This ultimately didn't work. He was in pain in general, and he had learned a way to kind of hobble his way around, and the wheels being close to his face were intimidating for him, and he wasn't getting the type of tough love training that would be necessary to really make something like this work. And so unfortunately this didn't end up working out, and he was put down a little while ago. But in the process, even though it didn't work as a prosthetic and it didn't end up helping that individual dog, we learned a lot about how to make 3D prints that had to bear a really significant load, because a 130-pound dog obviously puts down a lot of that pressure, but he was also in specific bursts of energy really energetic, and therefore we had to account for a lot of potential strains on these so that it wouldn't break and potentially hurt him further. So we learned a lot about how to operate our printers and how to design for real robustness, and that design ultimately did work for a dog that had a rear leg problems. This is our same student, Adam Williams, who designed this for his sister's dog after the process of going through this experience with Monkey. And then it also gave him a lot of momentum to carry in once we realized that dog project was going to be out of our realm of what we would be able to accomplish. We found that there was a communications professor's son, who was born without part of his right arm, and it was his remainder terminates just below the elbow. And so the existing prosthetics that were out there through the Enable Foundation, which hooks up people who need prosthetics with people who have 3D printers, and then provides open source files to be able to make prosthetics that will work for them. They are primarily intended for people who are missing part of a hand, so they don't have their fingers, but they still have a wrist. And then there's a version for people who don't have any of a hand, but who have most of a forearm. And the version that was there for people in this young man's situation was really bulky and would hurt a lot of complaints on the forums for that they were having problems with both functionality and chafing. And so we set Adam to work on redesigning, using the hand component from an existing Enable design. I believe this is called the Phoenix hand, and then redesigning the arm and how the Bowden tube would work to turn it from elbow flexion into digit flexion. And so this is the second iteration of the hands that we've built for Garrett, and we're working on some swimming attachments and bike riding attachments to let him live his more active life as he really wants to. But he's a great kid who's also really helped us with the constant troubleshooting process of designing something and putting it into place, and then letting him try it out. And he says, like, well, it'd be really great if this little cup came up a little bit further so that I could pull at this other angle that we hadn't thought about. And so then Adam and I would work out how to go through that and build it, print it, and give it back to Garrett and see how it worked. And at the same time as all of these projects are going on, I should also say that all these students were still staffing the lab. Depending on what semester it was, we were open. Sometimes we were open from 8 in the morning until 2 in the morning, and so there's a lot of hours and a lot of help to be given to students. And then in between that helping of mediating people's access and facilitating people's access, I should say, in between all that, they were working on these projects. And in between all of those things, we were also building a fleet of tables. So we moved, like I said, from 800 square feet to 8,000 square feet, and had a lot of empty space involved. The library administration was really keen on kitting it out with mobile furniture that was on casters that could move around, but they were used to thinking about things from a normal library perspective, which is usually going to say laminated particle board. And so coming from the sculptural background, I had seen and worked in spaces where people had been building things, clamping, gluing, soldering, all of that type of action, and those tables were getting really beat up. Even the solid wood tables that we had in those sculpture labs, they were significantly beat on, and I was concerned about the way a laminated particulate would be able to survive that type of action. So I worked with our director, Katie Peery, to come up with a design that would be palatable to library administration and exude the type of industrial chic look that they were looking for. And so we ordered stuff and built these essentially from scratch. And so here's a pallets of the butcher block wood. We got a 1-inch steel pipe. We bought about 800 linear feet of 1-inch steel pipe and this pipe threader. And we built a prototype, which you see there in the back with the silver fittings, by just going to Home Depot and pulling parts off the shelf and having them cut the pipes down. But that wasn't going to work when we talked to them about how many cuts we were going to need for this project. And so we were able to buy all the raw materials and the threader for significantly less than the cost of the proposed laminated particle board tables. And then we were able to get permissions for doing something like this under the context of student service learning, being that most of our students had really not much experience with cutting things down outside of paper and maybe some cardboard. And so we dove right into it with cutting down steel, threading steel, and cutting and joining wood, and all the oiling and finishing that goes along with that. A word of caution, though, in building these tables, we really wanted to make it so that there was stuff that could be built all with the type of equipment that we offer access to at the FabLab. And so it would have been really, really simple to just weld these frames together, to not deal with fittings and just cut down pieces of square stock or even round stock and then weld them together. That would have been simple and a lot quicker. But we were not able to get permission to weld in the library for really good reasons. Ventilation and training interests. It would have been a significant change in the way we would have had to control access to the space if we were going to weld in there. And so we didn't get a welder. We got a pipe threader. Pipe threading requires a heck of a lot of attention to detail and the tolerances about how close everything needs to be in the same length and the same thread counts. So we got some really good experience with students who had no basis or no background in this. Great experience with exposing them to not only how to actually go through these processes safely, but also how to hit a critical tolerance point and how to observe each other's actions in those workflows, and to provide constructive criticism and make sure that their peers were also doing that correctly, and we were getting usable cuts of pipe and we weren't wasting materials. And so here you see some of the layout of the space and the pipes that we had assembled into these tables. So we, let's see, I lost my train of thought here for a second. Okay, so we built 8 3-foot by 4-foot tables, 2 5-foot by 5-foot tables, 3 7-foot by 7-foot tables, and 2 9-foot by 5-foot tables. And then if you remember back all the way at the beginning of the presentation, when we saw the Raspberry Pis on the wall, all of those printers were sitting on a 20-foot rack that we built that holds all the 3D printers. And so all that stuff is all aesthetically similar, and it's all super sturdy, and it'll last for hundreds of years. 2-inch maple on top of 1-inch threaded steel. And so here you see some of the boards that have been glued up and they're getting ready to be oiled, and they're oiled. We had to work around the general library calendar on this. So to do the oiling, we had to do this with a lot of ventilation. so that meant we had to do this type of work on the receiving bay, where we couldn't get in the way of general deliveries. And so we worked at night around this, and when there weren't Friends of the Library events and whatnot, so that we would be out of the way and yet being able to do this type of work safely. And so there you see the first 3 tables that we were putting together. And even really basic skills such as drilling holes in wood to a specified depth, and using a socket wrench to assemble the tables were things that these students didn't have a lot of experience with, and those who did have experience with it were not so well practiced that we could just turn them loose on it. So there was a lot of oversight and a lot of constructive criticism, and making sure we had a good attention to detail throughout this whole process. And then we ended up with these really great products, but the products themselves are so much more than just being a substrate for doing work. They represent the fact that the students weren't just around when we were having these renovations. They didn't just see us move from an open, empty space into a space that was all populated with these nice tables. They had built the tables, and so we saw, especially when they were first rolling out, the students like bringing in their friends and like pointing to them and like looking excitedly at the tables before they would sit down to start working or studying at them, to say like, we built these. Like I just spent like, my whole shift last time, like sanding these things down and learning about how to work through grit levels and stuff like that. And what it also did is it let us build a lot of partnerships. And so here on the left, you see Luis and Stephanie were 2 of our more involved students about making sure that everything was being true and repeatable, and it was going to work. And on the right, you see a lot of our administrative folks who came down for one day of assembling everything together. So sitting on the floor back there in the dark blue shirt is our Dean of Libraries, Becca Bickle. And then we have several other department heads around here. The standing in the blue shirt is Associate Librarian Kelly Visnak, and then the department head of Access and Discovery, department head of the FabLab, and department head of Experiential Learning and Undergraduate Research, I believe. And so, high level commitment to this process of coming in and getting one's hands dirty was really meaningful. And so I think that day of seeing those administrators getting in and getting dirty help the students really relate to them, so they feel comfortable now saying hi and engaging in conversation. And it also help the administration see the hard work that it was to put these tables together, and how precise the alignments needed to be of lengths to make sure that everything was really going to work. And so that was a really great experience in and of itself. And then also I want to talk about how that process of building the tables helped us build partnerships across the campus. So in order to be able to clear coat the table frames so that they wouldn't rust, right now they're all coated in grease, which is what you see I'm covered in. So to remove that grease and to clear coat them, we needed to use a ventilation room more than just the passive ventilation of having the garage bay door open. And so the university paint shop through the facilities has a beautiful walk-in spray booth, and so I worked with those guys to get permissions to use their space, working around their calendar, so we weren't displacing any of the stuff that they needed to do. I got certified to drive university trucks through the facilities and fleet management. And so both of those relationships are things that we continue to find very useful. It got those guys excited about the stuff that the kids in the library building their own tables like that. That's something that they definitely didn't expect, and so that had a lot of novelty and intrigue for them. And so we've seen those guys come over, both in painting and fleet management, and also from other shops around there, where they would come in to just check out the FabLab and maybe run a couple of jobs. because of the conversations that got started around the process of building these tables. We also worked with the machine shop to make some custom bushings for us, and I'll get into that part a little later. So we did a lot of knolling, of laying things out and making sure that they were exactly aligned, and really checking to make sure that all the lengths were the same and the threads were exactly the same, because the fittings are not the same. And so here you see the layout of one half of the printer rack. And so you see on the bottom part of the screen how there's this bar that's connecting the two halves. And on the top part, there's that same length of a bar that it seems like there's no way it's going to fit in that space. And that's a compound additive errors in these different fittings, and how those fittings that are supposed to be either 90 degrees or 180 degrees aren't exactly 90 or 180. So when we built the prototype, things went together really easily because we bought some made in the US fittings. And when we scaled up and we're looking at building so many of these, we tried to save some money in getting the cheaper parts. And we learned a lesson there. So I want to help you guys learn that lesson too, that quality parts are going to save a lot of frustration down the line. It works. It just takes a lot of oomph and physical force to make these things fit into place. One of the things that is counterintuitive, unless you've built with this type of threading fittings before, is that because all the threads face the same direction, they're all right-hand threads, when you get the threading locked in on both sides, turning the pipe doesn't actually constrict or widen the gap. It just pushes the pipe back and forth between the two fittings. And so to get the pipes to be straight, we needed to way over tighten one half of it so that we could determine the spacing that those fittings needed to be from each other, and then back it off into that. And so all these finer details of construction, I'm not getting into just for the fun of talking to you guys about it, but mostly to talk about, we went through in intimate detail all of this with a large variety of our student staff. And so that has then helped them learn a lot of subtleties about how things are put together. And then we see that put into action on the daily basis when students come in from general campus and are talking about projects that they want to build. And our student staff are now way better equipped to talk them through all the different considerations that one needs to make in the planning and sketching and prototyping process to get to a usable result, because they've had these experiences of building at scale and with these more intense projects. So we had the good fortune of having this empty space to be able to get these things all put together. Here you see us blocked up in the paint booth with the cleaned off pipe, putting the clear coat on there. We used a lot of clear coat, and it was a good thing that we had good ventilation to do that, so that we kept our lungs safe. And throughout the process, both of just having the lab in general, and through the needs that this project brought to mind, or brought to light, we had lots of the different student service learning projects along the way. And so, like, we got pipe clamps when we were clamping together the large slabs of wood, and rather than buy clamp shields or use just little shims of wood, we 3D printed some of these using NinjaFlex, and had a couple of students get experience of modeling and making something into fitment with real world. Which, you just got to keep iterating and iterating with different considerations. That process of modeling to print to fit with some other non-printed real world object is that skill set that really takes 3D printers from being this novelty that is interesting into something that is that radical change in one's life, is the empowering nature of how you can change your world if you understand how to model and how to make sure it's going to fit with something in the real world. We also learned how to use our own equipment a lot better. So here you see the edge of two of the boards as they came to us. but we needed to make them glue together. And gluing large boards together, or really any joint, that seam has to be really spot on perfect. And so some of these boards were way too large to be able to use on the table saw. And we had already not gotten permission for very good safety concern reasons. We couldn't have a circular saw. And so we used our table router, our ShopBot, to true up those edges. And so here you see a test run that I did with some students to test out different feeds and speeds of running a bit across the maple, and to see how it reacted to that, to try and optimize the finish that we were going to get, and also not take as much time. And so does it work better if we run it a little bit faster? How fast can we get away with it and still get a good surface? And then aligned these large boards. So that was at a root team lifting for safety, and making sure that everyone knew what was going on before we just pick something up. And then moving these large boards required a lot of teamwork in and of itself. You see also the end grain on this side that's closest to us, and how rough that was. That took a long time to sand down, and so we decided to just trim that edge up too. So we would cut 3 edges and have one face that might have been a little bit out of true, but when the table is assembled, you never notice it. But we needed to have 2 edges that were completely flush so that we could glue them together properly. And then you see here on this edge to the right, on some of the longer tables, they didn't actually fit on our ShopBot. They were longer than we had the capacity for. And so that got us to learn a lot about jig making and how to make sure that we could true up the side and plane the top, and then move it a little bit and keep that registration right on, so that we could get what we needed without having to buy a bigger tool or contract it out. So that was a lot of fun, and I think that's the last slide. So I'll pop back over to see what questions y'all have. Sound is horrible. Sorry about that. Okay, what questions do y'all have? Here, I'm going to turn on everyone's mics.
What do you say?
Can you hear it? Can you tell if it turned on?
Yeah, I can turn on.
What?
Okay, everyone's mics are live. If anyone has any questions, all these projects will be posted up on our GitHub and or linked through our website as well, if anyone's interested in those.
Did you have a grant for it? The project?
Did we have a what?
A grant? You had to get the funding to the 8,000 square feet. You might have said it, I never missed that at the beginning, sorry.
We did have a couple small grants, but most of this funding was out of general library funds. Something that Dean Bickel had been kind of saving for throughout a couple years, and then we got off the ground all at once in 2015. Students definitely have to sign a waiver before we start doing any of this heavier work. With our student staff, we had them sign waivers, and then we go through a lot of training, and I was very, very present throughout every step of that way, to make sure that they both were learning and being safe. Whenever learners come in to make use of the space, we also have a liability waiver for them. A copy of the waiver. Yeah, I believe that copy that waiver is coming very soon already to the website. We're in the midst of a couple revisions on the website. We have been working extensively with our environmental health and safety organization on campus, which I would recommend to everyone, because they already are going to have some protocol in place for staff who need to be using these things, like in your carpentry shop and whatnot. And so then we just figured out how to modify those so that it's appropriate for our use, and still crosses off the boxes that they need crossed. And so that if it's not already available on our website, will be very shortly, so that people can pregame before they come into the lab. They'll already know what they need to have in terms of closed-toed shoes, or not wearing dangly earrings and having their hair tied back and things like that. Absolutely.
No dangling earrings.
I think I heard a question, but I couldn't quite hear it. If you type it, I think it's easier for. All right. Well, thanks y'all for coming to this virtual presentation. You can send me an email anytime. You can access my email through the FabLab website. It's also mchivers@uto.edu. And stay tuned. We're up to good things. I look forward to seeing some presentations y'all are making and sharing this knowledge.